Hello, this is, excuse me, Tina in the chamber. This is a test for TELUS. Is it working for TELUS?
Good morning, Tina.
Good
Carlos
morning.
and I are here. Yeah.
You can hear us? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Carr, do a sound test.
I am ready to do a test, Tina. How
Well,
are you this morning?
I'm doing.
Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities meeting of February 10th, 2021 to order. This meeting will be convened by electronic means as authorized under the order of the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General of the Province of British Columbia, Emergency Program Act, updating Ministerial Order number M192. As such, committee members are participating by phone, and as chair of this meeting, I'm also participating by phone. Please note if my connection is lost during any portion of this meeting, we will recess the meeting until my connection is restored. If council members lose connection during the voting process, we have staff on hand to facilitate getting you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process. The contact information has been circulated to you. Council members are also reminded that we need to ensure there is quorum during the meeting, so please make sure your video is on. I understand some of you might have some technical difficulties, so please be sure to check in when possible. The live stream of this meeting will have both audio and video. Video of committee members speaking, presentations, amendments, and vote results will be projected to viewers when available. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations and thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working together with them in partnership as we continue to build our great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of our fabulous City of Vancouver staff who work hard every day to make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Stewart is on leave of absence for civic business until 11 a.m. Councillor Chair Carr is in the chair. Councillor Genova.
Present.
Councillor Fry.
Present.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato has indicated she'll be joining us momentarily. Councillor Bly.
Present.
Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Kirby Young. The meeting has quorum, Chair Carr.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This morning, Council, before we begin our meeting, I do want to have us participate in a moment of silence regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So the City of Vancouver wants to recognize Indigenous, Métis, Inuit women and girls and 2SL LGBTQIA and non-binary people who have been subject to and still are experiencing systemic violence. The city is dedicated to responding to both the National Inquiry on Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls final report and Red Women Rising Indigenous Women Survivors in Vancouver's Downtown East Side report. In September of 2019, Council passed a motion for staff to review these two reports and identify how the MMIWG calls for justice and Red Women Rising recommendations align or misalign with the city's plans, priorities, practices, and policies, and where there is an opportunity to close the gaps. After significant community engagement, and by the end of this year, staff will be presenting Council with analysis and recommendations on how to address the gaps identified through this review. This morning, we will observe a moment of silence in memory of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and in support of their families who have experienced such devastating loss. In recognition, City Hall will also be illuminated in purple and yellow in honor of the February 14th annual Women's Memorial March, reminding everyone of the importance to remember and take action. On behalf of City Council, I would like to thank the Indigenous community who have shared their stories and strategies with staff on how to prevent ongoing systemic violence against Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit women, girls, and 2SLGBTQIA plus community members. So, Council, if you would please join me in a moment of silence now. Thank you, Council. Oh, so I want to go over with you the plan for the day. Following on the updated guidance that we issued on December 4th, 2020, and further extended on February 5th, 2021, in-person participation for local government meetings and public hearings is not permitted under the Provincial Health Officer Order on Gatherings and Events. Therefore, speakers who will be providing comments to Council will be by phone, and a moderator will assist in patching the speakers through when their turn comes up. Speakers should also follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting so you don't miss your turn to speak. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to Council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on at Van City Clerk. We have 13 items of business on today's agenda, 3 staff reports, 2 motions that were referred from the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services meeting on January 20th, 21, 1 motion that was referred from the Council meeting on January 19th and 20th, 2021, and 7 motions that were referred from yesterday's Council meeting. We will begin with consent items that have no speakers. We will recess for lunch at noon, followed by in camera at 1 p.m., reconvening the Standing Committee at 2:30 p.m. Should our business not be completed today, the backup date is Thursday, February the 18th, 2021, beginning at 3 p.m. A reminder that when presentations are being streamed, the public live feed does have a slight delay. So in terms of consent items, as chair, I'm suggesting for reports that have no speakers, no presentations, or consideration items, we adopt the recommendations collectively in a single motion. There are no speakers for items 1 and 2. Does any member wish to hold any of these items for debate or decision? Just going to give a moment to see if anyone's on the queue. I do not see anyone in the queue. We need a motion to, oh, sorry, does any member first wish to declare a conflict of interest on either of these 2 items? No. We need a motion to adopt
Motion to
recommendations.
adopt recommendations on
Thank you,
consent.
Councillor
Second.
Hardwick. We don't need a second in
Genova.
committee. Thank you.
Oh, that's right.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Those are adopted on consent unanimously. The following items have been approved. Number 1, contract award for supply and services of fleet tires. And item 2, contract award for supply and delivery of truck body aerial lifts. Thanks, Council. So we are now going to consider the reports that have either have presentations, speakers, or held for debate. Before we begin, I want to remind speakers that speakers have 5 minutes to make their comments, should state whether you are in support or in opposition to the recommendations, and may only speak once. Council members, you have up to 3 minutes to ask questions to speakers. However, speakers are under no obligation to respond. I will also ask if speakers are residents of Vancouver, if it isn't noted already on the speakers list. Following the last speaker on the speakers list for each item, as a pilot for the next few months, we will go over the speakers list of who were not present earlier and give them an opportunity to speak. So we are on to item 3 on the agenda, street naming, naming of new streets and street extensions in the new St. Paul's Hospital and Pearson Dogwood developments. We have Heather Gordon, City Archivist, Vancouver Archives, City Clerk's Department, and David Parkins, City Surveyor, Land Survey Engineering Services on the line to answer questions. I am looking for anybody to answer questions or ask questions if you have them. Otherwise, we will go to speakers on this item. No questions at this point. So I would like to call, just a second, Madam Clerk, to you to see if we have the speakers online, the first of which is a public body representative.
It is the clerk here, Chair Carr, and yes, both speakers are here and on the line ready to proceed.
Excellent. Okay, Tasia, Sierra, Alexis, if you can hear me and you're there, you certainly can begin in terms of your presentation to Council.
Thank you. Good morning. We are speaking on behalf of the City of Vancouver Persons with Disability Advisory Committee. The Advisory Committee is in favor of this recommendation. On January 23rd, 2020, a motion was passed by our committee that strongly recommends a street on the Pearson Dogwood redevelopment be named after Jeanette Anderson, and a plaque highlighting Jeanette's contributions be placed alongside the street. Jeanette Anderson passed away in 2016, but her legacy lives on. For the first time in Vancouver's history, a street will be named after a person with a disability. Jeanette Street, named after Jeanette Anderson, will be on the site of the proposed Dogwood Pearson Center at 57th Avenue. The site is both relevant and specific. Jeanette lived at Judge Pearson Center for over 37 years. The street will promote inclusion and diversity within the City of Vancouver. The naming of Jeanette Street is timely with the City of Vancouver's Accessible City strategy. The Vancouver City staff work collaboratively to achieve this huge accomplishment with the Civic Asset Naming Committee and the Persons with Disability Advisory Committee. Jeanette contacted polio as an adolescent, and she lived in her iron lung, seeing the world using a tiny mirror positioned at her head. She moved into George Pearson Polio Pavilion and lived there for many years, and then bravely moved into the community in 1992. Jeanette was a quiet diplomat and a strong advocate. She led by example. I served with her for many years, and she taught me so much, more than words can say, about advocacy and the importance of inclusion, and the power and value of bearing witness to others, even when you believe they are not watching. Jeanette was a champion among many. She raised to the occasion to achieve, advise, bear witness, and testify. She appreciated life and lived courageously, pleasant, and dignified to those that she met. Until her death, she continued to mentor Pearson residents. She loved living in the community and wanted others to have a home that they can create. Jeanette championed for a better world that was inclusive, equitable, and sustainable for everyone. We really hope today that a motion is passed naming the street in her honor. The naming of Jeanette Street will contribute to the knowledge, history, and future of Vancouver and the Pearson Redevelopment Center. Thank you. My colleague is also here, Paul Gauthier.
Okay, and that will be the next speaker. But first, I'll just ask, there are actually questions for you, if you don't mind. You could just remain on the line. And Councillor Wiebe, you have up to 3 minutes to ask questions.
Yeah, Tasha, thanks for coming in today to speak. My question is, January 2020, when it came to this council, we voted to refer it back to ensure that Jeanette was included. Can you talk about how it felt at the Person with Disability Advisory Committee and what it meant that this was brought back so that your committee had an opportunity to work collaboratively with the Civic Asset Naming to bring this forward, and how much that this name is really going to make a difference?
Thank you. It meant a lot. And for us, people were listening, and council took our issue seriously. We had been working on having a street named after Jeanette for many years. She served on the Disability Alliance Committee. She served for many years on the Persons with Disability Advisory Committee. She also was just such a champion for people that lived at Pearson. She was a peer mentor until her death, and she truly believed in furthering inclusion for all people, but especially for people with disabilities. So it meant a lot for us to be able to put her name forward and to really fight for her position and standing in the community. There are 5 categories that most cities' streets are named after. There was not one named after a person with a disability. And we really felt that in 2020, it is time to really show diversity within the city. And so we took it extremely seriously and worked extremely hard with city staff as well as with the Civic Asset Naming Committee to make this happen. It truly took a village to make it happen. And we stand here today just so proud of Jeanette and her achievements, and that of many people who champion every day.
So much. I really appreciate all the work from the committee on this.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Weeb. And that is it for questions. But I just do want to thank you for sharing the amazing attributes, contributions, and personality of Jeanette with council to help us understand how important the naming of our streets are for individuals like her. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Second on our list is Paul Gauthier. Mr. Gauthier, if you are there, you may proceed speaking to council.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's great to be able to follow Tasia. She spoke so well. I'm here on behalf of the Disability Advisory Committee of the City of Vancouver, and I am in support, and we are in support of the naming of Jeanette Street. I'm also here on behalf of hundreds of people with disabilities that could not be here today due to the early meeting time. And I want to be clear that I am a person with a disability, and I'm someone that wanted to be here today, even though it was very difficult for me to be here today. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with Jeanette for over 18 years. Such a caring, passionate woman. As Tasia mentioned, Jeanette contracted polio in 1955 when she was 16 years old. That's right, 16 years old. This happened just a few years after her brother Kenneth died from the measles. I want to take a moment for us to think about the pandemic and how we are all feeling after 1 year of restrictions. Jeanette, a teenager, spent 5 years inside her home on an iron lung, with only a mirror to see the tiny corner of the world that lay just outside her bedroom window. Most people would not be able to turn around their lives. In time, Jeanette learned to move on, using a ventilator on her electric wheelchair, and when she did venture out into the world, finally she realized just how much work was needed to improve the lives of people with disabilities. You know, it was interesting when Tasia said about her being a diplomat. You know, her family and her friends have always said that. And, you know, the kindness and the diplomacy that she was able to present when moving issues forward. All of her life, she advocated for a vaccine education for the public, pressing for more awareness and greater understanding. Jeanette's voice and diplomacy forged her future as she took on tremendous public projects that have gone on to impact thousands of lives around the province with a huge impact in Vancouver. Jeanette was a pioneer and was instrumental in the development of the Noble House project, where she actually ended up eventually living, and enabled it to become a model for accessibility in Vancouver. The City of Vancouver had the honor of having Jeanette living within, as she always looked for solutions, because she believed there was one for every problem. She was a founding member of the Provincial Respiratory Outreach Program and a mentor to hundreds. She was involved with the Pearson redevelopment, resident mentor, and guided team. She became very much a part of the George Pearson Centre redevelopment project. I want to take a moment to just make sure everyone realizes how important it is for us to be shutting down an institution like George Pearson Centre and redeveloping it for 114 people with disabilities that are going to end up being able to live fully in our society and as a community. And Jeanette wanted to make sure that that happened. And she supported those people that were in the facility for many, many, many years. There's so many things to talk about what Jeanette had done. Her legacy is about life, quality of life, that a wonderful life should be lived by all. And as her legacy endures the passing of time, so should her name. Recognizing her as a pioneer for change in Vancouver, indeed for all of British Columbia, by naming a street after her is the very least that can be done for a woman who selflessly devoted her life to others. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and thank you for recognizing people with disabilities in Vancouver. This is a huge day for our community, and I thank you.
And thank you. And you do have questions. If you don't mind, just stay on the line. And Councillor Genova, up to 3 minutes to ask questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gauthier, I was hoping that you might be able to talk a little bit about the symbolism or the importance and elaborate on sort of the meaning between where this street is located at Pearson and the importance of naming it after someone like Jeanette, but also Jeanette in living, as you said, 5 years on an iron lung. Were there some people who never were able to leave Pearson Hospital? Is there symbolism there in making sure that we remember that? And as you said, also that we acknowledge that it was not the best life or experience for everyone who couldn't live independently and instead lived at Pearson?
Thank you, Melissa, for that question. And it's a huge symbolism, actually, to have the naming of Jeanette Street. Many people would tell you that living at George Pearson Centre was something that has been a real challenge for most people that had lived there over the years. For many people, there was no choice, but this was the only place that they could go to get the support that they needed. Some people have said that there's been not such good things happening at George Pearson over those years. I don't want to get into the debate of that, but I want to say that George Pearson Centre is not fully living in the community and being able to fully participate. Jeanette has always been a voice of wanting to make sure that the lives of people with disabilities at George Pearson Centre could be better. And naming this street will indeed do that, because everyone knows that Jeanette was someone who said and always advocated for everyone in George Pearson Centre. Some people were not able to have their own voice, and Jeanette provided that voice. She became very good friends with so many people that would come and go out of George Pearson Centre. And she made sure that she was able to voice their concerns to people above. She was creating change within a facility that change is very difficult. But she made those changes within that facility. By her moving out into the community, by her showing the people that they could actually live full lives in the community, inspired so many more to be able to push back on the system, to look at getting support in the community. Because that was the trouble, is actually getting the actual support in the community. And by Jeanette being part of the Noble House and being able to present that people with disabilities can do it, it inspired so many.
Thank you so much. I think that's about my time, but I also want to thank you for your advocacy and for taking the time, even though it was so difficult to be here this morning with us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and that is it for questions. But again, thank you very much to very important contribution to council in terms of understanding the importance of such a decision in terms of naming streets. So again, thank you. And to council, that is the end of our speakers.
I'd like to move the report.
Yes, great. That's awesome. We only need a mover. So council, anybody wanting to speak to this? Councillor Weeb, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the committee for all their perseverance to ensure that Jeanette Anderson's name is recognized and we have the first person with a disability on a street sign here in Vancouver, and recognize that this is just the start. And I think we heard today of how important Jeanette was to the city of Vancouver, and maybe we can look at other opportunities to celebrate her life. I also want to thank Councillor Genova, who on January 21st made sure that this report was referred. And I think that was important because it was a referral report that sometimes can get buried in our busy agendas, and it was critical, and it's allowed for today to happen. So I want to thank Councillor Genova for that and her work on the Person with Disability Advisory Committee. And so I'm very happy and will be supportive of these names, and hopefully we can find a way to do more in the city to make sure that more people are reflected in the signage we have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And moving on, Councillor Fry, go ahead for up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, appreciative of Councillor Weeb's comments, reflecting on the Pearson Dogwood Street naming and the legacy of Jeanette, and thank you to the speakers and Councillor DeGenova for advancing that as well. I also just wanted to reflect on the significance of the naming of Nora Hendricks Way and the future St. Paul's site. As we know, the subject of Hogan's Alley is one of the uglier legacies of the push for urban renewal in the late 1960s and early 70s that displaced the Black community from formerly Hogan's Alley. And I know that there is work ongoing to see some kind of restitution for that injustice to the Black community and others. And I appreciate the work of the naming committee and ensuring that we are moving in that direction. And there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that naming Nora Hendricks Way in the future St. Paul's precinct is just one of the many pieces in a step to that direction. So I also want to highlight that and speak in appreciation.
Thanks for that, Councillor Fry. Council, I don't see anyone else on the list. So, Madam Clerk, could you move us to a vote on this issue, please?
Madam Chair, on a point of privilege, it's Councillor Dominato. I will take a vote in favor.
A vote assist in favor. Okay,
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, please do that.
And point of privilege, Chair, it's Councillor
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
So a vote assist in favor, please.
Great. Okay. And I noticed that, Madam Clerk, I am on my screen as Mayor Stewart, so I wonder if you could do a vote assist for me in favor, please. And perhaps get the screen changed so that it's... Yeah, Madam Clerk, it's still showing as Mayor Stewart rather than my name, so I can't vote. So please record me in favor. Madam Clerk, I'm still waiting for a... Ah, good, finally, thank you. Councillor Dominato, I believe that...
Madam Chair,
Councillor
it's
Dominato, I'll ask for a vote assist as well. Thank you.
yes, a
I'll
vote
do
assist in favor. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. It just took a little while to get us through those technical issues, Council, but and actually, Madam Clerk, I am seeing on the screen that Councillor Weeb hasn't voted, but yes, okay, fine. I think there might be a few technical glitches this morning, Council, but it is now a unanimous decision. Great. So we are now, Council, on to the fourth item on our agenda. We are starting with the referral items, and this item is referred on ensuring that people with health and mobility issues have protection and support when elevators are break down. Just to give you the background, it was actually considered at the council meeting of December 8th and 10th, and we referred this motion to the Standing Committee on City Finances and Services on January 20th, and due to time constraints at that meeting, you referred this motion to this meeting of February 10th in order to hear from speakers, debate, and decision. So we are on to, just one second, I'll see if we've got lined up speakers. Just to make sure that everybody's clear, you have speakers up to 5 minutes to make comments. You should state on whether you are in support or in opposition of the motion and only speak once. Council members, you have up to 3 minutes to ask questions to speakers, knowing that speakers are under no obligation to respond. I just want to correct, I did say, I think when Councillor Fry was speaking to the motion once passed, I said you have 3 minutes. You have 5 minutes to speak to motions, councillors, 3 minutes to ask questions of speakers when we're in committee. Pursuant to the guidance on December 4th, 2020, extended on February 5th, in-person participation for local government meetings and public hearings is not permitted under provincial health officer. Therefore, speakers who will be provided with the council will be by phone, and a moderator will assist in patching through speakers when your turn comes up. Following the last speaker on the speakers list for each of these items that have been referred, as a pilot for the next few months, we will go over the speakers list of who were not present and give them the opportunity to speak. I will also ask if speakers are residents of Vancouver. It's not noted on the speakers list. After hearing from speakers to each of the motions, we will then go into discussion on that motion. I want to remind council members your amendments must be submitted to the city clerk in final written form before you introduce your amendment. And please, as I say, ensure the city clerk has received your amendment before it is your turn to speak. You do get a response back by email that they have received that amendment. So we are on the first one, as I noted. We're now going to hear speakers on this item. Madam Clerk, do we have the speaker, Callie Wong, on the line?
It is the clerk here, Chair Carr, and yes, the speaker is on the line.
Great. Callie Wong, welcome to council, and you have up to 5 minutes to address council. You may have questions after.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Wong, and I'm a member of the Seniors Advisory Committee. I support the members' motion B2. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding the lack of timely elevator repair or replacement in Vancouver. I have written a report on behalf of the Senior Advisory Committee on this issue, and I believe a copy of my report is attached to the notice of council members' motion for your attention. As stated in my report, Vancouver has many multi-level apartment buildings where vulnerable seniors and persons with disability reside in, and they need elevator to access different floors of the building. When the elevator is broken, they often experience lengthy delays in elevator repairs or replacement in the building, which pose an immediate danger to their health and safety, and it greatly affects the quality of life and many activities of their daily living. Many of the older buildings have only one elevator, and there are only a few elevator companies that service Vancouver. And it is my understanding there are only limited number of elevator service technicians in the city, which compounds the problem. Buildings with aging equipment have problems getting replacement parts. Members of the Senior Advisory Committee, including myself, have experienced lengthy elevator repairs for replacement. In 2019, the elevator in my building had oil leaking from the cylinder, so it had to be replaced. And that project took over 4 weeks for the job to be done. During the time when the elevator was out of order, it was a real challenge for a senior like me, living alone with very bad knees, to try to carry on activities of daily living, like carrying groceries, laundry, garbage up and down the stairs. My building has 3 floors plus a basement. It was real agony to carry a bag of groceries of basic necessities like milk, bananas, bread, etc., up the stairs to my apartment on the 3rd floor. In order to get my dirty laundry down to the laundry room in the basement, I had to put them in a garbage bag, throw them down each flight of stairs, let it land on the landing, and then throw it down the next flight of stairs until I get to the basement. I tried carrying the full bag down a couple of times and almost fell down the stairs myself. Having to get the clean laundry back up the stairs was just as difficult, and I ended up with very sore arms, sore knees, sore back all during the time the elevator was out of order. I had to plan each outing very carefully to make sure each load I carry is doable and not cause too much pain in my knees, my back, so forth, going up and down the stairs. I had to cancel many of my social and volunteer activities so I do not have to go out and injure my knees further by going up and down the stairs. The City of Vancouver Property Use Branch does not have a formal process for identifying properties that house vulnerable seniors and persons with disability who are impacted by an out-of-order elevator. That department enforces on a complaint basis. That approach is, and I quote, "It depends on the severity of the situation. It could be an immediate order to repair to a verbal request to keep us posted on progress. Obviously, tenants' ability to safely enter or exit the premises would play a role," unquote. On behalf of the Senior Advisory Committee, we really appreciate Councillor Swanson and Councillor Boyle for bringing forward this motion. Accessibility is a human rights issue for vulnerable seniors and people with disability. A working elevator is our legs so we can move vertically in a building. And when an elevator is out of order, it has significant negative impact on our health and safety. Each building should have a realistic plan and necessary tools in place to provide assistance to residents with mobility issues when elevators are not working. This should be part of the city's earthquake preparedness plan, because without that, it will be a disaster waiting to happen if or when we have the big earthquake here in Vancouver, and it will cause many lives and unmentionable amount of suffering amongst the vulnerable seniors and persons with disability population. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
There are. Thank you for your presentation, and you do have councillors with questions for you. So if you want to just stay on the line, first, Councillor Boyle, up to 3 minutes, Councillor Boyle.
Thank you very much for phoning in and all of the work that you've done on this, Ms. Wong. I'm wondering, first of all, just wanting to hear from you. This was a motion that was brought forward through your leadership to the Seniors Advisory Committee as a recommendation to bring forward to Council?
Yes, that's correct.
And as you mentioned, you've done quite a bit of work and research on the issue. Was there anything that stood out to you or surprised you in all of the research that you've done on this?
Well, what really surprised me was the City of Vancouver Property Branch really does not have a formal process for identifying properties that house vulnerable people. So, I mean, it wasn't the news that people were stuck in their apartments 10, 12 days, and that is, really affect the quality of life as well as the health and safety of the residents.
Okay, and one last question. I'm wondering in that research as well, if there's anything more you think it's helpful for council to know around the jurisdiction, what pieces we as a city can do versus what pieces are the responsibility of other jurisdictions.
I think City of Vancouver has the authority to do something about the accessibility issue. I have served on the Strata Council many years, and each building on the Strata Council bylaw plan should have a realistic plan and necessary tools in place to provide assistance to residents with mobility issues. And that could be in the Strata Council Strata bylaw for each building. And I emphasize it should be realistic, and the council members in each building should be able to determine that.
Okay, thank you again for all of the work that you've done on this.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. And you have more speakers. Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Kirby Young, you're up next for up to 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Wong. Thank you for being here to speak to council. I'm curious in your discussions, and I know you identified some of the challenges, the fact that there's limited elevator service technicians and it could take a long time for parts. And I know coming from working in the hotel sector, there's a reason why we often had double or triple elevators. It was for redundancy if one went down, and that's not often the case, obviously, in housing buildings. But I'm wondering in your discussions if there's any specific strategies or things you've heard about that may be taken in other cities, or specific strategies that could help to soften or mitigate the issue if an elevator does go down.
I think one of the references in my report is a report from Ontario, and they have done something about that. So, a realistic plan could be something that, check on a vulnerable residence if, the elevator is out, have a neighbor to help the person with simple things like groceries and, garbage and stuff like that. If a building decide to have evacuation chair for residents who cannot be who needs the.
I have some questions. Thanks, Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Swanson, you're next. Go ahead for up to 3.
Yes, thanks so much for coming, Kelly. I was going to ask you the same questions that Councillor Kirby Young asked you, so I won't do that again, but I just want to thank you so much for all the work and all the research you did on behalf of the committee that you've shared with council here. That was really important.
Well, thank you for your support.
Great. Okay, and that's it. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. It's very important and incredibly helpful to council. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Council, this motion has obviously been moved, so we are now, open to discussion on the motion, debate, and decision. And Councillor Swanson, you're still on. Go ahead. Ooh.
Yeah, I sent an amendment, which is basically to just strike the last part, which when I thought about it and discussed it with Councillor Boyle, we didn't see how it was physically possible to do the last parts unless we got a helicopter or something. So I think if we just leave the first part, that'll do the trick.
So you're, sorry, have you sent that in to the clerk? Okay.
Yeah, it's up on the screen now.
I see it. Okay, good. So it's just striking the last, further that?
Yeah.
Okay, just a second before I ask people to speak, I'm going to move us to an amendment queue. Do you have anything further to say about that, Councillor Swanson?
Not about the amendment.
Okay,
I think
that's what we're on. Just the amendment
okay.
for now. Councillors, I don't see any of you on the queue to speak to the amendment.
Point of privilege?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Genova.
Could I please be added to the queue?
You may.
I'm having some technical difficulties, and I am trying to
No,
get
no, no, it's
unrolled
fine.
up
I
right now.
understand. You don't, you just,
Thank you.
it's all good. Go ahead, Councillor DeGenova. Up to
Okay,
5.
and we're speaking to the motion?
You're speaking to the
Yeah.
amendment, which is to delete the
Yeah.
further that.
Okay. I'm supportive of this. I was going to speak overall to the main motion at this time, but you know what? I will put myself back on the list in hopes that I will make it on in time. Thank you.
Councillor DeGenova, I will add you to the main list when we're back there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Council, there's no one to speak to this amendment. So, Madam Clerk, if you could move us to a vote on this, would be striking the further that, which is the last part of this motion. Councillor DeGenova, do you need a vote assist on this?
Yes, please, in favor.
Okay, Council, that's unanimous. And going to move us back to the main queue. And Councillor DeGenova, I am adding you to that main queue. Go ahead.
Thanks so much.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the
to
wrong
speak-
queue. I am so sorry. I just got to add you to that queue.
I just wanted to speak in support of this and also mention that I think, you know, as we had just heard from people on a completely separate issue that came to speak on behalf of the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee, I can't imagine what it must be like to be in a situation where your mobility is so limited that you're not able to get the basic needs of life. If you do live in, if you usually rely on an elevator and that elevator is not in service, I also have a lot of concerns that, you know, what I've heard before in my years on council, I know others have received the same emails, is, you know, desperation from people who finally reach out to us after property management companies have said, you know, there is a technician coming, but, you know, we're talking months down the road, or even, you know, for landlords that don't feel that they should have to offer that. And I, you know, think that it's something that we really do need to consider, both for earthquake preparedness, but also just as a basic human right, as it was rightly noted before, and for the fact that people are more vulnerable when they're not able to have, you know, the same independence and accessibility that those who are ambulatory do enjoy. So I'll leave it there, but I do support this.
Thanks, Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Swanson for up to 5.
Yeah, I really want to thank the Seniors Committee for bringing this forward. I've been in several Downtown East Side SROs, the Regent of Balmoral, the West, where taking food to people on the 5th and the 6th floors when their elevators are broken down for weeks and weeks and weeks. And some people are just holed up in their rooms and can't get out and don't say anything, and you don't know how they're suffering. And I think this could be a bigger problem too as we get higher and higher buildings. And I know after I got elected, some folks in the Downtown East Side said to me, well, you'd have to get something passed about elevator protocols, they said. So thanks so much to the Seniors Committee again, and I hope we can do something so that buildings that have these problems will actually make sure that none of their residents have to suffer unnecessarily.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Dominato for up to 5.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And briefly, I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Swanson for bringing this motion forward. It's an issue that I've been acutely aware of and I feel very strongly about. And if there's opportunities through our existing bylaws to make improvements, I certainly think we should be looking at that. We've all followed the stories of the situations that Councillor Swanson has described, whether it be SROs or other buildings where elevators have been out of operation for weeks on end, and there's no consideration in those instances for people with disabilities or other barriers to accessing their rooms. And I know in the instance of my own family, when my mother was living in an apartment in Falls Creek, in the last years of her life, was really unable to walk and had enormous mobility challenges and relied on the elevator in her building and would not have been able to go up flights of stairs to her floor. And so it is a human right. It's critically important. We've been talking this morning about persons with disabilities and mobility challenges, and I really just simply applaud and thank Councillor Swanson for making this a priority, bringing it forward to Council, and that we're having this discussion. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. And Councillor Boyle, looks like you're to close.
Great. It has been a really powerful process to work with the Seniors Advisory Committee, and particularly through Calla Wong's research and leadership on this, and continuing to move the issue forward around that table and at this table. As we've heard from other councillors, it's an issue for so many residents across the city, and particularly an issue for some of our most vulnerable residents. And it's when we hear about when there are problems that get particular media attention, but also an issue that causes a acute level of concern at all times for many residents, knowing that they could be quite stranded if something went wrong with their elevator. So glad to see such strong and unanimous support from Council. I'm sure that the Seniors Advisory Committee will appreciate hearing all of these words and seeing this issue that they and the People with Disabilities Advisory Committee as well, and many residents across the city have been talking about and working on. Clearly, passing a motion doesn't solve the problem, but the work ahead will hopefully make important and tangible differences, both in that low level of concern that exists for many people at all times, and in incidents where people become isolated because of the lack of mobility through their buildings. So really glad to see all of this support and the leadership, particularly from residents and the committees that have brought it to this point. And as a liaison with Councillor Swanson to that committee, it's been a good process to get to help amplify those voices to bring it forward. So glad to hear so much support, and look forward to that sustained commitment in the work ahead to make change on this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Boyle. And actually, Councillor Wiebe is looking like he's going to close. Thanks, Councillor Wiebe. Go ahead up to 5.
Yeah, sorry, just one. Yeah, really supportive of this work coming forward. As someone that has broken the elevator in my mom's house and made her stranded, I know the importance of this, and I recognize that the state you put someone in is so awful, and I don't think a lot of us recognize what it feels to be stranded. I really appreciate the two speakers earlier that really talked about a different way of seeing this world and still coming out in a very positive manner. And I think that this type of motion is the thing that showcases that we do truly want a city for everyone. And really appreciate Swanson and Boyle and the Seniors Advisory Committee's work on this, because it's where we want to go. And I keep loving the fact we keep voting on stuff like this. So really supportive and excited to vote on it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. And Council, it does look like there's no one else on the list. So, Madam Clerk, could you take us to a vote on this motion?
Chair Carr, it's Councillor
Yes.
Dominato. I'll take a vote assist in favor, please.
Great. Councillor Dominato, I'm sorry, Councillor Genova, do you need a vote? Oh no, you voted. That's great.
I
You're
managed to get on.
You
Third
are up and
time's
running.
the charm.
Okay, and that everyone has voted, and that is a unanimous decision. Thank you, Council, and thanks again to the speakers. So we are now on to the next referred item, which is from the Standing Committee on City Finances and Services meeting on January 20th. It's item 5, improved street lighting in Vancouver. It was motion B3, moved and introduced by Councillor Dominato and seconded by Councillor Kirby Young. So we are now going to hear from speakers on that. Madam Clerk, do we have, I believe you have indicated to me that Eddie Elmer is on the line.
April Fool's Day. Did I turn it off?
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk.
Yes, it is the clerk here. We do have the speaker on the line, Chair Carr.
Great. Okay, Eddie Elmer, if you are on the line, you are now able to speak to council for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay, super. And can I ask if you can tell me when I have 30 seconds left, because I don't have a timer in front of me?
Absolutely, I can do that.
Thank you so much. Okay, so my name is Eddie Elmer, and I'm a member of the 2S LGBTQ+ Advisory Committee, and I'm also chair of our Public Safety and Aging subcommittees. On behalf of the committee, I'm speaking in support of this motion to improve street lighting, and I'm very grateful to Councillor Dominato for bringing it forward. The precursor to this motion was a 2014 motion at the Seniors Advisory Committee, of which I was a member at the time. That motion, which was supported by numerous committees, called on the city to reduce the amount of time to repair lighting outages or malfunctions and to consider additional lighting in high-risk areas. Council supported a modified version of that motion in recognition of its commitment to seek a designation from the World Health Organization as a global age-friendly city. Since passage of that motion, there has been an increase in the speed with which lights are repaired, but problems persist relating to the identification of outages and to inadequate lighting in general. Street lighting is something we don't pay much attention to until something bad happens. Research shows that car and pedestrian collisions are more likely to occur in poor lighting conditions. So too are incidents of tripping, slipping, or falling, especially during inclement weather and in areas with uneven sidewalks or obstructions. For older adults in particular, whose night vision and mobility tends to decline over time, dark streets and sidewalks can be a treacherous obstacle course. As a gerontologist, I hear repeatedly from older adults that street lighting is one of their top concerns. In fact, when our committee held a roundtable discussion with LGBTQ seniors and asked what their top concerns were, street and sidewalk safety was at the top of the list. Lighting is also critical in reducing crime. Indeed, research finds that good lighting can help reduce crime by up to 1/3. It can also help victims or potential victims respond more effectively in an emergency. They can more easily spot someone following them. They can more easily read street signs to report their location. And first responders can more readily spot people in distress. On a personal note, I was the victim of an LGBT hate incident last May, and I had some difficulty reporting my exact location and getting a good description of the suspect because several lights in the area were out. Research also shows that good lighting makes people feel safer. A 2014 survey by Vancouver Coastal Health found that about 1/3 of all residents felt unsafe walking alone after dark, and in some neighborhoods that number was even higher. As the city is currently experiencing many challenges, it's possible that this number is even higher now. Lighting improvements may be one way to help residents feel safer. While perceived safety may not be considered important by some, it's of great importance to sexual and gender minorities. Many of us have experienced a history of violence and are therefore hypervigilant in public, especially at night. If good lighting can help to mitigate this, it's worthy of attention. Whether by improving real or perceived safety, good lighting can also reduce the number of people who avoid leaving their homes for exercise or important errands, and can reduce social isolation and increase community pride. And it can make life less stressful for those who work in the nighttime economies, as many people in the 2S LGBTQ+ communities do. Given the importance of street lighting, the motion before you focuses on 3 areas that we think require attention. First, there continue to be barriers and gaps related to the identification and reporting of outages. The city generally relies on residents to report these problems using 311 or Van Connect. To be sure, these services are useful. In fact, we analyzed 2 years of 311 data and found that generally lights are repaired fairly quickly, if and when they're reported. However, not all outages are reported or in a timely manner, as evident by about 450 residents over 2 years who reported that lights had been out for several months or even over a year. And these are just reported incidents. We think this may be happening because not everyone knows about 311 or Van Connect, or they may have trouble using these services. Notably, several residents indicated that they had reported the same problem multiple times with no resolution, and many voiced concerns about feeling unsafe in their neighborhoods due to lighting problems. Also of note, lighting repairs appear to take somewhat longer in some neighborhoods compared to others. A bigger concern, however, is reporting outages in or near parks, businesses, or in between buildings where public safety problems are more prevalent. While residents may be quick to report outages in front of their home, they may not do so elsewhere. I know this based on my own observations as a frequent night walker. Some lights in these areas have been in disrepair for months, sometimes over a year. I've purposely avoided reporting these lights to see how long until someone else reports or until a street repair crew notices. It's possible that residents think someone else will report problems in these areas, but clearly it's not happening. So we are recommending that the city explore other options for identifying outages, such as asking sanitation crews to systematically report outages during their nightly duties. The second main request is for more lighting in dark areas, especially sidewalk level lighting. Ordinary streetlights may be tall enough to illuminate roadways, but may not always reach the sidewalk. We'd also be interested in more bollard-type lighting as well as hybrid lighting poles that have both streetlights and sidewalk lights on the same pole. And better illumination in and around bus shelters would also be welcome. Finally, this motion calls for more attention to lighting obstructions like overhang from trees. As I'm sure many of you notice, this tends to be a problem during the summer when leaves can reduce lighting levels quite significantly. While we do desire to see the preservation of greenery in the city, we think staff and crews could do a better job of trimming leaves or branches. We hope Council will support this motion and request that staff provide a report to address the problems outlined in the motion and to explore the possible solutions that we have suggested.
Oh, well,
Thank you.
you timed that perfectly. I forgot. I'm
Did
so
I?
sorry. I forgot to give you
No,
your
it's
30
fine.
seconds. But I
Nope,
was
great.
concentrating, and you were just right on. So thank you
Perfect,
so much.
perfect.
And
Because
you
I
do
reviewed
have
it 100 times.
you do have questions. So if you
Thank
wanted to
you.
stay on the line.
Sure.
And Councillor Swanson, you are up first. Councillor Swanson? I'm not seeing.
Over.
Oh, yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry.
No problem. Go ahead, up to 3 minutes. Councillor Swanson, we are still having difficulty hearing you. Councillor Swanson, again.
That's a holdover. I don't need to speak.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Councillor Kirby Young, up to 3 minutes. Councillor Kirby Young, we're also not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thanks. Good morning, Eddie.
Hi there.
Thanks for being here. I know that you're quite a walker and you do a lot of walking. I wonder if there's any specific areas that you would point to that you think are poor in terms of lighting, either whether that's sort of specific areas of the city or just sort of certain types of streets or others that you think are particularly problematic.
Interestingly, I walk around. So I walk around the West End and then Cole Harbour. I do the downtown area, Gastown if I'm feeling a bit adventurous, and yeah, sort of the Granville district. I actually find the downtown area and the business districts and Gastown are actually pretty good. I've noticed the West End is a bit problematic because you have a lot of trees and a lot of tall buildings, very densely populated, and so it's harder for light to reach the street. And there's just not as many lights as there are in the more commercial parts of the city. So, and certainly people who live in my neighborhood, in my building, particularly older people, do complain quite regularly that there isn't enough lighting in this area. Cole Harbour also could do with improvement. I can't speak to other areas. I'm only on the downtown peninsula.
And in terms of sort of that balance or tension between people that say, well, in the urban environment, you don't want too much light pollution and dark skies is a good thing versus, you know, the critical role that lighting plays in safety. Do you think that some of these other applications, like particularly residential areas, things like the sidewalk level or the bollards, could mitigate that so that you're balancing safety, but not also creating a sort of light distractions for people in a residential area?
Absolutely. I really like the bollard lighting. I mean, it's low-level lighting. It's usually not very bright, but the light is directed where it needs to be, which is on the sidewalk. And it's not bright enough or tall enough to intrude into people's windows. But I do certainly recognize, I mean, that when I reviewed the 311 data, I did notice that there were quite a few people who complained about too much light. And my response to that is, I mean, new lighting installations can be directed in a way that light doesn't go up into the sky or into people's windows. And we're certainly not asking for a whole lot of extra light. We don't want the downtown to be lit up like Disneyland or anything.
It's just doing it well, right? So
What's
yeah,
that?
I think you're just saying it's just doing it well and thoughtfully.
Doing it well, doing it smart. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I think doing it smart is more important than doing more, personally.
Okay. And one last quick question in terms of what's the impact of low lighting on people? How do you think it changes behavior if lighting is poor?
Well, I mean, personally, I can tell you. I mean, I'm constantly looking behind my shoulder. I don't put earphones in my ears when I walk around because if I can't see very well, I need to rely on my hearing. I have been startled many times when I'm walking around, and I think I'm pretty street savvy. I'm pretty aware of my surroundings, but there are still times like that time at Cole Harbor last May. A man approached me and started following me. He called me a name I can't repeat and chased me down the street and started to, he said he would put a bullet in my head. I did not see him approaching, and I could not, when I called 911, I mean, I'm kind of in shock. I could not actually see the name of the street that I was on, even though I normally would know, but at that moment I was quite upset. I couldn't see, and I couldn't get a good description of that person. That really impacted me, and I know other people have had similar experiences. So it's for our community in particular, but for everybody, this has real implications for real and perceived safety.
Thank you very much, Eddie.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby Young. You do have more questions, though. Councillor Genova, up to 3 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thanks Eddie for coming to speak to council. I know that you have you've been a long-serving member of many city advisory committees, and I wonder can I ask you, do you feel, because I know there's been some commentary about lighting and where that lighting would be, and I think back to sort of what former Councillor Ball, who also was liaison to the committee, had said about light pollution and having dark skies, and that we can do that, but also have safe and effective lighting that make people feel safer on our streets. Do you think that this is more about community safety and a community safety approach coming together and trying to find ways that, help with lighting, whether that's going out to speak to different groups alongside our engineering staff and along with all of the other recommendations here? I mean, do you see this as essential to being able to make people feel safe and comfortable in our city?
Yes. Short answer. And every neighborhood in the city is different and has different lighting needs and different geographies and different kinds of buildings. So I think it would be very important for engineering staff to work with different neighborhoods and different advisory committees to sort of pinpoint to understand the lighting needs and challenges in different neighborhoods and sort of come up with tailored solutions for each neighborhood, because what works in one neighborhood won't work in another. So I definitely think we need more of a collaborative approach. And we really need to reach out to the public, because I hear repeatedly people email me and call me and they say, I wish the city paid more attention to this and we had more discussion about this, but I don't know who to contact. I don't know who to complain to. So I think this is a good opportunity right now for us to open up this discussion.
Okay, thanks. And do you feel it's important? I've been having some conversations, and in fact, it was with Councillor Wiebe who had sort of brought up the idea of trauma-informed, looking at sort of this from the perspective of people who have experienced trauma. And I'm saying that fully understanding that, this is something that he's focused on as well. But do you think it's important that we truly engage instead of just with organizations, but also try and get input as we plan this out moving forward with people who have experienced trauma as to what would make them feel safe?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for your comments.
Great.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much too. That is it for questions. Very much appreciate you being here and sharing all that very important information. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Council, that's it for speakers. We are we are at the point of debate and decision. Councillor Kirby Young, and you have up to 5 minutes to speak to this.
Yep, thank you. I won't take that long because I know we have a full day today, but I just want to thank Councillor Dominato for bringing this forward. Also to Eddie Elmer and the committee for identifying sort of the critical impact of lighting or lack thereof if it's not functioning or if it's not sufficient in the city. And it highlights, no pun intended, a very real issue. And this is, absolutely 100% within the control and jurisdiction, responsibility and ability of the city of Vancouver to invest in and improve over time. And it is, to me, sort of a core service that the municipality provides. And it really speaks to city building and urban design and the importance of really looking at environments from different points of view. And all of the groups that have been identified in this motion, which I think is well put together for consultation, whether it's the seniors, persons with disabilities, the 2S plus LGBTQ committee who brought this forward, was really key point of conversation there, or the Women's Advisory Committee. If you are a member of any one of those groups, you really understand what it's like to be in a dark or insufficiently lit space, particularly in an evening. And I think we've all had a situation where we have either had an issue and been prey to something in a situation or have felt extremely uncomfortable and have just oftentimes by the skin of our teeth avoided one. And I can recall being in an alley once and literally running and hightailing it out of there because there were some folks there that I really, it was quite clear I didn't want to meet, and I hadn't been able to see them because it was so dark and the lighting was insufficient. And so you think about the role that it plays on public safety, and that's really critical, where good quality urban design can positively increase safety. But it also impacts people's daily lives because I recall when we were on the park board and we did a bit of analysis and looked at various parks. There's a lot of pop-up parks and parklets, particularly through the West End and other areas. And there were some fascinating results that came back that women tended to traffic or attend only and enjoy the larger parks primarily. And if you looked at the patterns and how they shifted during the day into the evening time, the women would only stick to the larger parks where there was busier, there was more people around, there was more lighting, for example, and didn't go to the other ones that were beautiful kind of little locations and could really provide that respite in the midst of an urban environment simply because they were very cognizant of safety. And so when you have sort of that kind of environment impacting the ability of large groups of people from being able to enjoy the amenities in their city, I think that's such a shame. So it really does speak to the importance of thoughtful design when we are building out our city, and the impact that it can have on people. So hopefully they don't have situations like Mr. Elmer has had, and so many others in Vancouver. I'm also really hopeful that people have confidence in reporting to Van Connect, because it will be incumbent on the city to not just to encourage reporting, but also ensure that we have good response times to fulfilling these requests so that people have that confidence to continue to do that. So I thank Councillor Dominato for bringing this forward, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Chair Carr, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was. Councillor Fry up next for up to 5 minutes.
Oh, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Councillor Dominato, for bringing forward this motion, and to Mr. Elmer for speaking to it. I've submitted an amendment to the clerk.
Just while you're doing that, I'm going to move us to the amendment queue so that you can speak on the amendment in that queue. Just a second, I'll clear it. I don't think that these are, I think this is an old queue.
Thanks, Chair. So, and I do hope that the mover will consider these friendly amendments. I was long ago impressed by the work of former Councillor Elizabeth Ball on some of the night sky work, and I do have a profound appreciation for our night sky, and often lament the impacts of artificial lighting on our enjoyment of the night sky, and also of the impacts that it has on our environment, including wildlife, birds, and indeed our own circadian rhythms. In the original motion, it mentions overhanging tree cover, which I would assume is probably more accurately framed as underhanging tree cover, because any overhanging tree cover would really only be protecting the sky from light pollution. And then adding an additional clause, really just reflecting on the work of Councillor Ball and the outdoor lighting strategy that was subsequently developed by the City of Vancouver, and just sort of reinforcing that those sort of objectives, including the improvement of public safety, of course, but also while reducing light pollution and minimizing ecological impacts. So I think while we work towards these important improvements to public safety and lighting, that we're also keeping in mind those issues of light pollution and our night sky strategies. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much. And just speaking to the amendment, Councillor Kirby Young, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking to the material point of the motion, the second component around sort of ensuring minimize light pollution and the ecological impact, I'm happy to support it. Councillor Ball really was a champion on this work in terms of the dark skies piece. And it's why I'd asked the question of Mr. Elmer, our speaker, around the balance between providing that livability and real and perceived sense of safety in the city relative to quality of life as well, particularly as we live in a denser environment. But I think with LED technology and other types of lighting implementations, as was discussed, and considering those, whether it's bollard, sidewalk lighting, and a combination of traditional street lighting with sort of softer approaches like LED, I think that this is achievable. I won't quibble on 6. I might ask to sever that one because I think it does overhang the light fixtures, which I think is the intent there, but I'll limit my comments to the substantive part of the motion, the amendment. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Weeb to the amendment.
Yeah, I'll be supporting the amendment and really appreciate 7 recognizing that as a liaison to the Vancouver Bird Advisory Committee, that some of the new LEDs have actually created significant light pollution, and we're seeing that in areas like Falls Creek Flats, where we're no longer seeing barn owls and other birds that used to be frequent certain areas of the city. And so I really appreciate this amendment. I think it's important for us to continue to do our work to ensure that we support the ecological wisdom and continue to minimize ecological impacts. So appreciate this coming forward, and I will be supportive.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Weeb. Madam Clerk, I see no other councillors to speak to the amendment, so if you could move us to a voting queue. Councillors, this is on the amendment by Councillor Fry. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Great. Back to the main queue, Councillor Fry. I think you would have had the floor. I'm not quite sure why.
All good, Chair. I'm fine. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you are. That's still on the floor. Are you good to go?
Good to go.
Great. Thanks. Councillor DeGenova, you're up next.
Thanks
Up
so
to 5.
much. I just wanted to echo my thanks to Councillor Dominato for bringing this forward, and no pun intended, shining a light on this issue. I think that it is really important that we balance, and it's one of the reasons that I had asked Eddie Elmer, who spoke very eloquently about the need for this and bravely shared his experience. That takes courage. Um, but there is a balance that needs to be struck between light pollution, night skies, people who possibly have aversion to light and are sensitive to it. But on the same side, making sure that people feel safe. And as we continue to talk about community safety, I think that it's really important that we look at what City Council can do. And it's measures like this that Councillor Dominato is bringing forward, and I think it's very well informed. And it's as I'd asked Eddie Elmer,
former councillor Elizabeth Ball. I was fortunate enough to sit with her and consider her a mentor. She did strike that balance. She didn't go one way or the other way. It wasn't, yes, the entire sky should be dark, or we should definitely make sure that there is more light for safety, and not consider the lighting strategy that came from that. So I think that it is really important that we also strike a balance here. And in doing that, I think that Councillor Dominato has outlined it very well, as to the steps we can take to move forward with this. So wholeheartedly support this. Thanks, Councillor Dominato, for your work, and also for carrying on with this council. Some of the work that was done by previous councillors, as Councillor Fry noted, and you had noted, as well as Councillor Kirby Young, I think, the contributions of Councillor Ball. So thanks very much. I will be supporting this wholeheartedly.
Great. Thank you, Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Bly, up to 5.
Thanks very much, Chair. And yeah, I just want to express my support for the motion. I think it's a good motion, and the asks that have been outlined of staff, and the focus around 311 and Van Connect. Mr. Elmer brought up some very important personal experiences that I think others have experienced and have felt around the city. So I appreciate Mr. Elmer coming to speak to council, and also the continued advocacy in this on this issue. And I recall just a few weeks ago, at the end of January, that the Broad Street Bridge lights were out for 3 days, and I actually called 311 to report it, as I had just taken a trip over the bridge and noted how dark, incredibly dark it was with pedestrians. So the only thing I want to flag in this is that there is an opportunity around increasing urgency, I think, and that was in my experience speaking to our very dedicated staff and great staff at 311. I don't propose that any one person does not take these calls seriously, but I think when it comes to things like lighting and reporting lighting, that there's an opportunity for us as a city to communicate out, especially something, of course, as serious as the Broad Street Bridge lights out for 3 days, and also just the sort of consistent the consistent message that we recognize that lighting is extremely important. We get a lot of outreach from people across the city bringing up where they see lights are out, but also just an improvement that we could be making in terms of lighting, generally speaking. And so I appreciate that we're having this conversation publicly today, and that we can continue to strive for the best balance, as Councillor Fry spoke to, right across the city. And I just want to express my support for the bollard approach. I also agree that this really does make sense, and see this as a real plus on greenways across the city, and would also help to strike that balance. So yeah, appreciate the motion. I think it's a really great motion. Happy to support.
Thanks, Councillor Bly. And next, Councillor Dominato. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for their comments and for the friendly amendment. I do want to just first off by saying thank you to the 2S LGBTQ+ committee and Eddie Elmer. Really, this is their motion. It's not my motion. This is their hard work and advocacy in bringing this to our attention. As you noted, Eddie commented on that this issue was raised to the Seniors Committee, and a motion passed several years ago. But this is really their work in wanting to elevate the issue of lighting, but particularly in the context of public safety, particularly as Eddie noted, and it's included in the motion, around groups of our citizens, the 2S LGBTQ+ community, seniors, women, and one of the things that Eddie spoke to, which I think is critically important, and as you've probably noted from Eddie's comments, he's done substantive research in this area, and really helpful to all of us. But he talked about the sort of opportunities for prevention of crime, but the other piece he talked to is that he talked about how there's studies that have been done that people feel safer, but there's that perceived safety, and I think that's really important. I spent 3 years living on campus at UBC, and this was often a conversation there. It's a vast campus. I lived on the campus, but lighting was spotty in many areas of the campus, and you had to walk between buildings and hedges. And as a young woman who was, 18, 19 years old, there were times I felt unsafe. And I probably wasn't unsafe, but I felt unsafe because the lighting was very poor. UBC did quite a bit of work in that area. I also had the blue light system, emergency poles, and the safe walk system. But I think that sense of well-being and safety is really important. And I think I'll liken it to some of the work I did provincially is around preventing bullying and violence in schools. A big focus of that work is around focusing on the physical environment, but also the climate and culture you foster in schools. And you can translate that to a city environment. Again, in schools, we had kids who said they felt uncomfortable because there were certain hallways where the lighting visibility was poor in a particular hallway of their high school. And so there's little things they could do there. But and I think it speaks to what Councillor Kirby Young was saying, that paying attention to the public realm. And so I think for me, this is a really important discussion. It is a core service, and if there's an opportunity to raise awareness of how to report outages, to improve how those are done through our city crews, but also different lighting approaches, they all merit being looked at, and it's not something that we can delegate to another level of government. This is squarely in our court, and again, that the essence of people feeling safe and welcome and comfortable in the city environment. While at the same time, as it was noted, we have to recognize the implications of light pollution. But again, I think there are approaches to that. So really appreciate and thank the committee for bringing this forward, and Eddie Elmer and others who worked on the motion, because it is an important issue for citizens.
Thank you, Councillor Dominato. And Councillor Swanson, I believe that you've added yourself to the list there. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you take a look at the last three motions, the street naming, the elevator, and the street lighting, they've all come from our committees. And I think it really shows how valuable it is to have these committees, and that they have an eye on the ground that can keep us really connected if we listen to them and do the things that they are suggesting. And I just want to thank them so much. This is all volunteer time, and I hope it's having good results. That's all.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Good point taken. Appreciate the relaying of that message to the committees. Council, that is it for speakers. So, Madam Clerk, if we could go to a vote, this would be to the amended motion. And that is unanimous. That was very fast. So, well done. Great, it's on the screen there. Okay, Council, we are now to referred items that were referred from yesterday.
Madam Clerk, Madam Chair, it's Councillor Dominato, on a point of privilege. Is just noting that on the last vote, it's displaying the wrong motion that we're voting on.
Oh, did it?
It had affordable housing as the motion.
And I had a point of procedure right after that.
Yeah.
So just noting that for you and your clerks. Thanks.
Clerk, does that make any difference?
It is the clerk here. It didn't get switched on the agenda, but it was voted on as council had understood it to be. So it is fine, Chair Carr.
It's fine? Okay. And my apologies, we are moving on to number 6, turning the key of encouraging affordable home ownership in the city of Vancouver. Was that your point, Councillor DeGenova?
Yes, it was. Thank you, Chair Carr.
Got it. So we are, as I say, on the motion that we have one, and the motion has been moved, as everyone knows. So we are now moving to one speaker, who I believe is on the line, Richard Evans. If you're on the line, you may speak now, and we'll just check that we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfectly. So go ahead. You'll be addressing Councillor for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor and councillors, thank you for this opportunity to speak. As introduced, my name is Richard Evans, and I'm chairperson of the Replan Committee of the Falls Creek South Neighborhood Association. I'm also a member of the advisory committee of the newly formed Falls Creek South Community Housing Trust, which has been created to strengthen capacity in Falls Creek South to deliver affordable housing. First, I will speak in support of Councillor DiGenova's motion from the point of view of Falls Creek South residents. I will end with a friendly amendment to the motion, which I have forwarded to the clerk. In Falls Creek South, the program would add another tenure type to the existing co-ops, nonprofits, and stratas, and further support a mixed income, mixed tenure housing community, providing a continuum of affordable housing options. For example, a current cooperative housing member or a nonprofit rental housing resident in Falls Creek South may reach a financial position which would allow them to afford ownership housing, but only if it is below market in the manner of affordable home ownership, thus freeing up their units for those with smaller incomes. It could also be an option that some of the existing stratas may like to convert to. Right now, as we are all well aware, affordable housing options are severely limited in the city, particularly for low and middle income earning households. As the motion says, our neighborhoods are at risk as housing in Vancouver is becoming increasingly unaffordable for residents. And we're certainly seeing that in Falls Creek South. Current residents can no longer secure mortgages due to expiring land leases, and new families cannot afford to move in. Councillor DiGenova's motion presents an opportunity for a tenure that would allow for younger families in the missing middle to obtain housing in my neighborhood. Falls Creek South is a possible location for a pilot project, and the emerging Falls Creek South Community Housing Trust is a potential partner in developing new housing. The Replan Committee of the Falls Creek South Neighborhood Association has been nurturing relationships over the years with BC Housing and CMHC, as well as with the Cooperative Housing Federation, British Columbia, and Van City, to position the association to act when opportunities arise, such as the Affordable Home Ownership Program. We believe that together we can stop affordable housing becoming unaffordable. We also believe that together we can grow Falls Creek South in partnership with the broader community of Vancouver. Again, I speak in support of Councillor DiGenova's motion, and I have one friendly amendment to propose. In Resolution D, to add the phrase, on city-owned lands in Falls Creek South. With this, Resolution D would read that Council directs staff to identify opportunities, including areas on city-owned lands in Falls Creek South, where zoning can be appropriate for the Affordable Homeownership Program. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. You have questions, so if you want to just stay on the line, Councillor DiGenova, go ahead, up to 3 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Evans, if I may call you that.
Yes.
I wanted to thank you for coming to speak in support. And I wasn't neighborhood specific in this. As I'm sure you know, I've been working on this, trying to move things forward on this since 2014, before BC Housing or CMHC had any programs to support this. In looking at the current programs that evolved in the absence of our charter not being able to accommodate our own AHOP, or Affordable Homeownership Program, at the City of Vancouver, which our staff have put an excellent, have just done excellent work and put a lot of effort into the research on that. I wonder, I just wanted to be clear, you're asking for it to say including, so that they identify opportunities, including in Southeast Falls Creek. But if it could it be considered instead? I wouldn't want to ask them to identify something that currently might not fit with these programs, but may fit with another program and is addressed in other parts of this motion, in asking staff to go and see what might be coming as well. So although I'd like to
and I'm not sure, maybe another councillor will include that, and I'd be happy to support it. Do you support affordable home ownership citywide is my question. Just really
Correct, I do.
Okay.
I do, including Falls Creek South, yes. Yes.
Okay, including Falls Creek South. So thank
Correct.
you very much, and I really appreciate what you've said, and I do hope that this would be a way forward for all of the neighborhoods in Vancouver, but also in Falls Creek South. That being said, I wouldn't be able to commit to that until I'd heard back from our staff and from BC Housing and or CMHC. But thank you for your
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, and those are your questions. But again, thank you for taking the time to come to speak to council. It's always very important to do that. So thank you. Council, we have no other speakers to this issue. So we are now into debate and decision because it has been moved, of course. And Councillor DeGenova, we're on the main queue. Councillor DeGenova, are you?
Thanks. I am on the main queue. I had put myself on there, am I?
I'm just adding you because
Thank you.
I think you were so fast you still remained on the question queue.
Okay.
So
I saw one move over, so thank you so much. I'd like to begin, Chair, by proposing an amendment, and it's because I really went through so many drafts of this and have so many motions on this topic that an earlier draft that was not finalized, it was in my error, was submitted. I appreciate Councillor Fry for pointing it out to me. But in B, I've just sent in new language and hoping the clerk can bring this up. And also recommendation E, instead of will deliver, may deliver. Obviously, our staff would report back and let us know if it could deliver this or may deliver this instead of will. But B would be changed to that council direct staff to approach CMHC and inquire of any possible programs that may be available to incentivize and or support affordable homeownership in Vancouver for middle income households. So I just wanted to ask that we could first go into debate and decision on that amendment.
absolutely, I'm going to move us to an amendment queue for that. Councillor DeGenova, I'll put you back on that amendment queue if you want to speak to it. I'm not.
Don't have anything else to say. I think I've explained it.
Great. Any other councillors wish to speak to this amendment? So the amendment is adding and or support. Got it.
Oh, it strikes the language in B and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, got it.
And E.
Yes. Oh, you're doing both of them at once? Oh, yeah,
yes.
I see. That's,
thought
yep,
it would
it's
be
up on the
easier.
screen. It's all good. That's great. Okay. Council, there are no speakers on this queue, so I am going to gather you. Sorry, back to the main queue. And Councillor, Councillor Boyle, I saw you on the amendment queue. Or, sorry, you added yourself to the main queue. That's good. Councillor DeGenova, you still have time left on the main queue.
I do, and I actually have a point of information through you to the acting city manager, if that's possible.
Yes, absolutely. Acting city manager, are you available? Go ahead with your question, Councillor DeGenova.
Thanks very much. Through the chair, my question is, I had understood in the staff comments that staff had talked about the considerable amount of work that affordable home ownership would take overall. And I know, as I'd mentioned, this is something that I've been trying to move forward with since 2014, and very happy that council, both this council and the previous council, did as well. But my question is it possible for these conversations to run parallel lines, just looking at the timelines of the community housing hub and some of those funds, in looking for an update back from staff? So this is asking for staff to update us
by Q3 2021, aligning that with some of the housing work that they are doing when they report back, but also the BC Housing Hub. So there's two questions in one there. I guess it's parallel conversations and aligning it with the timelines for BC Housing.
Thanks, Chair Carr, through you. Yes, certainly in terms of the conversations that are called on in the motion for engagement with BC Housing and CMHC, staff would pursue those in the course of the ongoing discussions that we have with both of those agencies. So we would kind of add that into the long list of topics that we're talking about with both of them. In terms of additional work, there is work for staff here, but we would look to manage it within the broader scope of the various housing initiatives that we have underway this year. Council, you'll have seen the memo that we provided last week, just kind of mapping out the kind of major elements of the housing work program. There's a lot going on, so we would work this in to that work program. Obviously, if Council directs us to do that, and would come back with an update as indicated by Q3.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And I understand that I have some time to make comments at the end also, but just wanted to note that I really tried in the whereas points to, give a bit of a timeline and the history for this motion, Council. And I, also in looking at the BC Housing Hub funds, but also in looking at CMHC and other motions that have come forward from both Mayor Stewart and Councillor Dominato and other council motions that address affordable home ownership. I think that it's important that we also consider continuing on in looking at all types of housing in Vancouver. I also was very clear to state that this would not be at the expense of, it's not affordable home ownership or non-market housing and social housing and rental housing. This is looking at including affordable home ownership. And I think that there's some opportunities right now that I look at other municipalities like Coquitlam, that they have worked together with BC Housing to allow for affordable home ownership. That means that BC Housing is providing that second mortgage to the homeowner who's income tested and tested through BC Housing prior to entering into the program. So it saves the City of Vancouver a lot of work, and I'll reserve any other comments until after when I have another 5 minutes.
You are
Thanks so much.
definitely out of time. So thank you, Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Wiebe, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, we'll be speaking in support of the motion. I think affordable home ownership is key in the City of Vancouver. I think that we have a lot of young people and a full generation that have felt that they've missed the gap or they've missed the opportunity. We had a BC assessment roll that showed that property values in the City of Vancouver went from 211 billion to 449 billion. That's an increase of 238 billion in less than 10 years. And I think that just showcases the inability for so many to get into affordable home ownership. We hear about we need rental, but I really know of a lot of people that would love to get into home ownership, but the down payment or the opportunities aren't there. So really appreciate DeGenova for bringing this forward. I think there's a lot of people that would really like to be involved, see something happen and apply to join this program. So thank you, and I will be in support.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Wiebe. And Councillor Boyle, you are up next. Up to 5.
Thanks. I am also in support of more housing options for more people, and also, in reading and thinking about this, also conscious that we don't have unlimited staff time to be wrestling through the many housing challenges across the spectrum that we know residents face in the city, and that we as a council have directed staff to work on. And so I am comfortable supporting the motion. And also I just want to be really clear on the record that in the mix of all of the things that we're asking staff to do, and in the mix of the multiple competing priorities that we face in this housing crisis, my hope is that we prioritize those at the lowest ends, those in the most need on the housing spectrum. Of course, all of these issues are connected and related. I recognize all of that. this is a piece of it, but I really want to see us moving most quickly and prioritizing most in terms of staff time, the creation of more non-market and below market housing options, more secure rental housing options, more nonprofit housing and co-op housing in every neighborhood of the city. So again, I'm comfortable supporting this, and in light of many pressures and a lot of work to do, I hope that we don't prioritize ownership over a recognition of the more than 50% of our residents who will never own and are simply looking for healthier and more secure and stable and more affordable housing in each neighborhood of our city.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Dominato, up to 5.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and happy to provide some comments around Councillor DiGenova's motion. Appreciate that Councillor DiGenova has been tenacious in bringing this forward, because I know that this is an area that it's close to her heart. She's passionate about housing and has brought numerous motions before previous councils in this area. And I believe indeed this council is, everyone around council is passionate about housing. In the context of this motion, it speaks to affordable home ownership. And while we are focusing our efforts on non-market housing, supportive housing, rental, and I think, and we've all supported those, and there is also a need to focus on affordable home ownership. As Councillor Wee pointed out, there are many young people, I say young people, and I'm probably under 50, but we've got a range of people looking to get into the market, and it is incredibly difficult for a variety of reasons. And I think that this program holds a lot of promise for that, and it is about giving people choices. And it provides some stability. But the other piece of this is, when we talk about home ownership, is the opportunity for multi-generational living, and Councillor Hardwick has spoken about this in the past. You know, I'm living in a home 3 generations here, and it provides and enables that type of living. And so I think that we need to, as a council, continuously be looking at providing or enabling, I should say, is a range of housing options on the spectrum, and considering that is that that people have different aspirations and needs, and we can play a role in enabling those. And I think we have done a substantive job and are making great strides around on the rental side. Obviously, would love to see more social housing, but I think affordable home ownership is another area that we need to pay some attention to. And I think it can certainly be resourced as part of the work that our staff are doing in the housing portfolio. And so very supportive of the motion. Appreciate Councillor DiGenova bringing it forward, as well as the comments I heard from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. And next, Councillor Kirby Young, up to 5.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also want to appreciate Councillor DiGenova bringing this motion forward. I think that we are living in one of the cities in the world with the most expensive housing costs. And yes, absolutely, we're focusing a Herculean amount of effort and resources trying to tackle those that sort of are at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of needs for social and supportive and nonprofit housing. But this is an important part of the continuum, and I think we're sort of at a different point now as people are growing up, and they may have had the opportunity to grow up in a single family home. Not everybody has, but some have. And they don't see their path forward to home ownership in the same way. And for many, it is a pipe dream. However, in conversations with BC Housing, and I'm fortunate I've had the opportunity to sit down and discuss the program that they've been developing on affordable home ownership, it is really interesting to see the unique strategy that they've developed around sort of supporting, making it easier to access that mortgage and how the financing can work. And so I'm actually really looking forward to this. And my takeaway, I think, in dialogue and conversation with BC Housing reps is that they're really looking for an opportunity to implement some of this work, to look for a pilot project, to look for a very willing partner and to get a signal from the city of Vancouver that this is something we're interested in doing. So I'm hopeful that if we get a very strong, resounding vote in support of this motion, the staff will be able to take that very strong signal to housing, and we'll be able to look at bringing this forward to residents of Vancouver as one of the many solutions that we have to bring to bear to tackle our housing issues. So I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see a program that could give people the nudge that otherwise might not be able to get into an ownership situation, and it can provide a lot of stability for people, and we know how critical housing is. So I'm very happy to support it, and I look forward to hopefully seeing an implementation in Vancouver in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Swanson, you're next up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm really kind of conflicted about this one because of the work implications and the money implications. I really strongly believe that the priority should be on lower and middle income renters, and that's where our staff should be focusing their work, and that's where BC Housing should be focusing its money, and that's where we should be focusing our money as a city. I know we are approving a lot of townhouses, a lot of condos. Those are ownership. There's a lot of talk about giving people choices, but it always comes down to the higher your income, the more choices you have, and the lower your income, where you can choose between a storefront in front of a grocery or a storefront in front of a pizza place. So I'm really strong that we need to prioritize in our work and our money the type of housing that serves lower income people. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. And Councillor Fry, you're next, up to 5.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I won't take up too much time on this, only to say that I am also going to be supporting this motion and really curious to see what staff come back with. I think affordable home ownership, there is a lot to that gets somewhat articulated in this motion, but I think that our staff will be able to bring back, not the least of which, of course, is that through BC Housing, they do have an affordable home ownership program, and so does CMHC. So there's money on the table that we potentially could avail ourselves here in the city of Vancouver. And of course, the notion of affordable home ownership, as illustrated in the Falls Creek example, has proven to be an opportunity to create housing cooperatives, and increasingly as we look towards things like community land trusts, and I know that's an ongoing discussion here in the city of Vancouver. We have a number already, and we're contemplating a community land trust for the Hogan's Alley site at some point. So I think that these are all uh, and community affordable home ownership is a big part potentially of a community land trust kind of model. So I think these are certainly worth exploring, getting our staff up to speed on the opportunities as they present themselves, so that we are prepared should we find ourselves in a position where, for instance, a community land trust at Hogan's Alley becomes something that we want to contemplate and incorporate the notion of affordable home ownership. So I think this is a good idea to investigate. So I will be supporting the motion. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fry. And Councillor Genova to close.
Thanks so much. I can't see my cue right now. There we go. So I am able to close now. Thank you,
Yes,
Chair
I
Carr.
did check with the clerk. You can
Thank
close.
you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank my colleagues for their words of support, and just a few other facts that I wasn't able to get in there about affordable home ownership. And I hope that this helps to alleviate the fears and any concerns of any other council members. Uh, when we look at affordable home ownership, it also being a part of the continuum of the housing spectrum does help those who possibly, and yes, there are people who may be overhoused once we add this program. They free up rental uh, for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access that rental. So So I think that that's important. That being said, we definitely need to prioritize. And I think that, we look at some of our processes, like the short program, and how it does prioritize social housing. I was very proud to bring many motions forward, saying that, we should have a race to the bottom. What's the lowest income housing and how do we get it online the fastest? That being said, I think that this would be a missed opportunity. Right now, developers can go out to BC Housing and can look for this funding themselves. That being said, this would give the City of Vancouver an opportunity to decide in what neighborhoods and work with BC Housing through possibly an MOU to see where that would go. And appreciate Councillor Kirby Young's comments. Chair Carr right now. Chair Carr, you may remember in 2015, I believe at 2016, it was you and I who went to the ledge, hoping for a meeting with the housing minister. All of council was invited last term. You and I were the only ones who did come to that meeting, and that's where I had prepared a briefing note and had originally briefed the minister on what we were doing with our affordable homeownership program. They were interested in looking into a program themselves, spent a lot of time talking to their staff about that over many years now, and was really, really happy to see their affordable homeownership program come forward. So I remember that we were there together back last term, and I'm hoping this is something that, eventually we can move forward with. I'm not sure how many more years it will take, hopefully less than the Killarney Senior Center. But that being said, Council, this is again just a piece of the spectrum. And I wanted to note also that I understand that, from our staff and their comments, that this would be citywide. And Mr. Evans' comments were very well taken, that Southeast False Creek needs to be considered as well. So with that, I'll leave it at that, Chair Carr. But yes, thank you, and I hope we can all get behind support for this motion and work with BC Housing and CMHC on funding.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Genova. I do remember that meeting with the minister in Victoria. Council, there's no one else on the list, so Madam Clerk, could you take us to a vote on this amended motion? And it looks like everyone was able to vote without assistance, so we have got a unanimous decision. Great. We are now on to the items that were started to be referred from yesterday. So the next one is item 7, protecting tenants from real estate investment trusts, which was motion B3 yesterday. It was moved and introduced by Councillor Swanson and seconded by Councillor DeGenova. We will now hear speakers on this motion. Council, we do have a fair number of speakers, I believe altogether 29 on the list, plus a public body representative. Again, when you are asking questions of speakers, you are limited in this case under committee to 3 minutes, but the speakers do have 5. We will start with a public body representative, Commissioner John Irwin from the Vancouver Park Board. Commissioner Irwin, if you're on the line, you can begin speaking so we can check that you are being able to be heard by. And this is item 7.
Good morning. Yes, good morning, Chair Carr and councillors. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. So up to 5 minutes, Commissioner Irwin.
Yes. No, I know you have a lot of speakers and a busy day, so I'm going to try not to take up that much time. Thanks for having me speak, Madam Chair, Carr and councillors, and good day to members of staff and the public. I just wanted to speak. Well, I'm a resident of Vancouver. I guess that's maybe a taken given. I just wanted to speak in favor of the motion trying to protect tenants from real estate investment trusts. Basically, by 2017, as the preamble says, 20% of the units in Canada are already subject to these investment models. And in BC, they're up to 4%, but could likely grow. And just going back a bit in time, in Toronto, these were undertaken, at the turn of the century in 1999, and the rents there jumped 22% within 2 years as a result. And then later in 2000, the rents went up by 37%. In other words, it's a way to get around the allowable rents when tenants shift from one type to another. One person to another, I should say. And so I just like to point out that I think this motion calls for good action. Communicating with the federal government to look at CMHC support for these items and make sure that they prevent rent increases with tenant turnover. And then on that note, I think vacancy control is something we should really seriously consider as a city to try to keep people from getting gouged during a trying time for everybody on the income side. The pandemic may also, as the preamble says, create a situation where there's, predatory purchases by these investment pools to gather up sort of smaller asset owners of buildings, and because they may be forced to sell their properties. So I just wanted to reiterate my support for it, and wish you all the best today. Thank you.
Appreciate that. You do have, questions. I believe Councillor Genova, are you on the queue for questions?
No, I wasn't. That was
Okay, that must be a holdover. Okay, no problem. So I don't see any questions for you, Commissioner Irwin, but thank you for taking the time. It's always very much appreciated to hear, the public and other elected officials speaking to our motion. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Council, great. Council, we're moving to the main public speakers. I believe Sarah Sagai, who is number 1, has called. So, Sarah Sagai, if you are on the phone, you can go ahead.
Hi there. Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yep, we can hear you well. So up to 5 minutes to speak to council.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the council for, first of all, Councillor Swanson for bringing this motion forward, and council for making the time for it. You may be aware that the Real Estate Investment Trust, they've been kind of in the news a lot recently about, I think, 15 rental apartment buildings were sold in Vancouver to sort of a joint investment by 2 investment trusts, or one investment management, one investment trust. And we're seeing more and more of our existing affordable, especially affordable rental stock being sort of bought up by these sorts of companies. And this is a really unsettling trend, as the council is well aware. We have a lot of low-end affordable rental stock in Vancouver that were built in the 60s and 70s, especially if you look at West End, where there's a high density of rental units and renter population in Vancouver. There are a lot of long-term tenants, especially seniors, who've lived in rent control units, and that's why the rents are low. And these are the types of units that are being targeted by real estate investment trusts. You're also well aware that no new buildings that is built, whether it's a condo that becomes a rental or it's a purpose-built rental, can match the level of affordability of what exists. So if the council is concerned about supply of affordable housing, I think you should be really, really concerned about this trend of REITs buying up existing low-end affordable stock and flipping them into high-end. We have statistics from Acorn Toronto that just one real estate investment trust called Caprit flips about 14,000 low-end rental units per year into the high end. And from their basically their own documents and their own admission, and also from a research that Professor Martine August has done at the University of Waterloo, we can see that this type of this is their standard business. They're very explicit about the fact that their goal is to buy low-end rentals and use what they call the rental upside to basically update the rents, bring them up to the market level. So, of course, as you can imagine, this involves getting rid of a lot of tenants because that's how, or also, if you can't get rid of them, well, you have to find a loophole somehow to increase the rent, which means they might have to leave anyway because lower income tenants cannot afford the new market rent. This is also a phenomenon that I think we're experiencing right now because of the COVID economic downturn, that these buildings are being bought by investment trusts. This is something that also happened after the 2008 stock market crash, especially in the U.S. A lot of people lost their jobs, couldn't pay rent, and then properties were put up for sale, and who can make the investment in dire economic situations, usually these kinds of large investment trusts. And so I think this is really concerning. The motion suggests some actions for the city, but I hope that you go further than this. You can be advocating to the province to bring back the eviction ban, which is something that I think anyone making investment into low-end rental housing right now relies upon to know that they can get rid of tenants in order to increase the rents. You can advocate for emergency rent control between tenancies or even rent freeze. You know that we have a rent freeze in the province right now, but it actually doesn't apply to when a tenant moves out. There is no freeze or even control. And this actually poses a very dangerous incentive for landlords to try to get rid of tenants. The ACORN report also shows that from only 7 REITs, the federal government has lost about $1.2 billion in tax revenue. So we have a situation where we have these predatory companies evicting tenants, and also the federal government, in fact, subsidizing them in a way, or giving them tax breaks. And
Ms. Aga, you have run out of time. However, you do have questions. So if you want to stay in the line, I can have the Councillor Swanson go ahead with questions. Thank you so much. Councillor Swanson, go ahead with questions up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, Sarah, and for all the work you do organizing tenants. What did you think when you saw that 2 REITs had bought up 15 Vancouver apartment buildings?
Oh, I thought here's 614 households who are going to be really stressed out and anxious about their housing. I would be really concerned if I were living in one of those units. And let me tell you, I rent in a house, and I've been thinking, actually, as some of the rents have been coming down, I've been thinking of moving into maybe an apartment rental, which is kind of better for renting from various ways. But then you see something like this, and you're like, these existing rentals are not really secure, and I'm really, really surprised that the city and the province and the federal government are not doing more to protect what we have in the midst of a really, a deep housing crisis on top of that, this pandemic. I don't know where I would go if I were living in one of those units and I had called them home for a couple of decades. It's in 600 households. I don't know. That's a really large number. It's kind of scary.
So, in your experience as a tenant organizer, what usually happens if someone moves out of a rental unit or is evicted from a rental unit or dies, what happens to that unit?
Hmm. Well, it's usually put up for rent for a lot higher. That's for sure. I think one thing that we've also been seeing during the pandemic is that, as you can see from CMHC numbers too, the vacancy rate has actually gone up by a lot, but rents haven't come down. And this is something that you may notice even if you go on Craigslist or wherever they're renting. The rents come down from like the really high end into sort of the middle and high end, but they don't come down more than that. So you still can't find a one bedroom for less than like $1,400 a month. But a lot of people can't afford that, so the units stay empty, and there's still people living in overcrowded situations, and lots of people homeless. So I think the landlords sit on the units until they can rent them out for what they think the market can bear. But I don't think the market bears that right now. But still.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great. And that's great. Thank you so much. And that's it for your questions. Very much appreciated you coming and speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. So I believe that the next person that is on the list and here is speaker number 4, Theo Lloyd Coles. So is Theo Lloyd Coles on the line?
I am. Yes. Can you hear me?
Great. We absolutely can hear you clearly. Go ahead for up to 5 minutes to council.
Great. Thanks. Hi. My name is Theo Lloyd Coles. I've lived in Vancouver for 13 years in about 7 different apartments, 2 of which I've been rent-evicted from. I've had to leave because while some apartments were affordable, the caveat was that maintenance was not a priority. My wife and I recently moved from the only apartment where we've actually felt secure. The building was owned and operated by the Affordable Housing Society, a nonprofit, where due to reasons outside of their control, street noise and space, we've had to find a new home. Luckily, we found one floor in a house that was within our budget. I recently found out by Googling that our landlord owns hundreds of units in the Lower Mainland and has gotten very rich off the backs of his tenants. He also has a habit of rent-evicting tenants when he decides he needs to make more money. That's been in the news. As a longtime renter in Vancouver, I've seen and experienced power imbalances between tenants and landlords, always in favor of the landlords, of course. I've had many friends move provinces because they couldn't see a future in the city where they could live and raise a family. I'm by no means wealthy, but I have a wife and we have stability in our careers and we make a decent living. We have savings. We're at a stage where we'll soon decide to put down roots. We don't see a future in Vancouver. Being a renter here equates to instability, and buying a home with enough space or renting a home to raise a family isn't within our budget here. Co-ops have years-long waiting lists. So we're most likely going to have to move provinces or countries. Interestingly, my wife comes from Germany, which is one of the great economies in the world, and being a renter there isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not putting yourself in a vulnerable position. You're not wondering when the eviction notice is going to come. And her parents have been renters for over 30 years in the same house, and they raised all 3 of their children there. It's still affordable for them, and they experience no shame in being renters. It's not an exception, their story in Germany. Now, real estate investment trusts financialize our homes. That is to say, they change them from being homes and sanctuaries to where our friends and families and neighbors live to being assets in a group of anonymous shareholders' portfolios where the only thing that matters is profit. They buy up swaths of affordable rental stock because they know they can raise rents. This outprices existing residents, putting whole buildings and gutting whole buildings and communities. If restrictions are not placed on how REITs can operate, they'll only further exacerbate the dire situation that is the Vancouver rental market. It will reinforce that those in power are not truly interested in changing the status quo of precarious, unaffordable living conditions for low and middle-income Vancouverites. It should be clear to you that REITs are not in the business of sustaining or building communities. They're in the business of making money first and foremost. They are money-making machines that don't care about our stories. The story they care about is Q1, 2, 3, and 4. For REITs, it's their shareholders that they are in service of, not tenants. Renters are a means to an end for them, and the end is money. Let's change the perception that being a renter is shameful. Renters are not lesser. We're not stunted in our life journey. Please pass this motion so that what little remains of affordable rentals in Vancouver don't just become shares in the portfolio of a bunch of anonymous people on Bay Street. This motion is a small step in the right direction. Thank you.
And thank you very much. You have no questions from council, but I just really want to thank you again for coming and taking the time to speak to council. It's very important to us.
Thank you.
Council, we have speaker number 5, Earl Peach on the line. So Earl Peach, if you can hear me, please, you can begin speaking to council.
Okay, am I audible?
You are perfectly audible. Go ahead for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm here to speak in support of Councillor Swanson's motion. I live in a co-op, but I've been evicted previously from housing which was affordable in the interest of a new buyer who was virtually forced to seek rent increases by the bank that she was getting a mortgage from through renovation. And I can't even begin to express to you the difficulty and trauma which results from being the victim of those kinds of events. That's an effect not just on the market, but on the spiritual and psychological state of people trying to live in this city. I know that Vancouver's been struggling for years to create affordable housing for tenants, but the influence of these large organizations, the real estate investment trusts, could potentially put Vancouver back years in that fight. First of all, in spite of the fact that they occupy only 4% of the market currently, it's obvious from other jurisdictions across the country that they offer a clear threat to affordable housing for low-income people. It's also obvious that they represent the interests of an investor class which is seeking to exploit the housing market to maximize their profit, which regards housing as just one more commodity to be traded like gold or oil, and which sees the added benefit from joining real estate investment trusts, of seeing their investment shielded from appropriate federal taxes. They have no incentive to act as responsible landlords, either financial incentives or even legal incentives. Their decisions are only based on what will give them the most profit. So to address this issue, Vancouver needs to demand action from the federal government on real estate investment trusts, limiting their influence nationally by taxing them appropriately and stopping subsidies to them. That's why I'm here to speak in support of the motion. Jean Swanson is asking for two basic things, each of which makes sense to me. First of all, write to the federal government asking that real estate investment trusts be taxed and denied the incentives they now receive, without passing those additional costs to them on to tenants, I should add. Additionally, Vancouver needs to encourage other forms of ownership, particularly nonprofits and housing co-ops, and to investigate and implement some form of vacancy control. Vancouver can't legislate the existence of real estate investment trusts, but this city can work to limit their effects on the market here, which threaten to be devastating. And that's my statement.
Great. Very much appreciate that. You have no questions to you, but again, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you.
Great. So, Council, we actually don't have any other speakers on the line for this item, and multiple emails have been sent to the speakers. Given that, I am going to say that this is, and I've been in communication with the clerk, so there have been a number of times where they've reached out and So I'm going to close that speakers list and move us on to the debate and decision. However, it's at 11:50, so we can start that. And if necessary, you can make a decision about whether you want to extend past 12 to complete, or if you would prefer to end at 12, and we'll just continue debate and decision after our lunch and in-camera meeting. And we have Councillor Genova on the list first. Councillor Genova? Councillor Genova? This is thank you. Maybe we could, clerk, you could check to see if Councillor Genova's audio is working. Otherwise, I'm going to advance Councillor Swanson. Councillor Swanson?
Yeah, is there any way we could maybe just hold this off so we could hear from some of the speakers who are perhaps anticipating that they wouldn't speak till after 3?
I'm moving forward with the process as is. In terms of if no one's on the list, I'm obligated to move forward with the next stage, debate and decision. But it would take a motion in order to do that, Councillor Swanson, because
what would the motion say?
Madam Clerk,
just that we
could you advise on the nature of the motion? Would it just be to I would need to have the clerk advise on the language.
Can we get her to do that?
It needs to be in writing, so you can. I believe it is to. Well, I would suggest it just say that to continue to hear speakers with a call, including a call for speakers after we reconvene. I believe it's at 2:30. I'm just going to check my timing, Madam Clerk. Can you just confirm? I think it's 2:30 today that we're reconvening.
Yes.
Do a final call after that. So to reopen the speakers list and continue with it after we reconvene at 2:30.
Okay, I sent that.
Great.
Councillor Carr.
Okay, just 1 second. We have a motion, so that doesn't need to be seconded. We're in committee. A point of
information regarding the motion.
For a point of information, you have to be on the speakers list, Councillor Kirby Young.
Sorry, I'm doing this.
If it's a point of procedure, you could ask me a point of procedure.
It's a point of procedure, actually, I believe. I think that's correct.
Okay, Councillor Kirby Young, go ahead. Just 1 second. I will just get you on the speakers list for that. Go ahead so we can hear you more clearly.
Yeah, thank you. My point of procedure is just that, because I know we try to be consistent for equity's sake in the process for everybody, it's just to confirm, pursuant to what you said earlier, that we have followed our usual procedure and the clerk did make attempts to connect with and reach out to the speakers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and that's what we do normally for each motion, that they are contacted and given an opportunity to join the line?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we haven't done anything different.
No, the procedure I have followed is absolutely correct. However, our procedures allow a member to bring forward a motion, as Councillor Swanson has done, to reopen the list and to have us vote on that. And I believe it's a regular motion, but I'll have the clerk advise me. 50%. So it has to be a majority of councillors voting for it, or is the bar higher, Madam Clerk?
It is majority.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and I'm just waiting for it to be visible on the screen. While we're waiting for it to be visible on this, well, anyway, let's hopefully this decision can be done right away. We have 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left. So as soon as we can all see the motion, Madam Clerk.
I just
May I suggest
Sure.
that we extend a motion to extend to deal with the motion on the floor, so that we don't get caught up in not being able to vote on this would be useful.
Motion to extend
To complete this,
this
to deal with this motion on the
Thank
floor.
Point of.
Thank you. All those in just, did you have a point of?
It is debatable.
Yes, it is.
Okay, we're just dealing with the. We're not making decision on the final motion before the.
We are debating the motion, which is on your screens,
I
which is
understand.
that council continue to hear speakers on the REIT motion after the meeting reconvenes at 2:30 p.m. That is the motion on the floor. And I'm going to clear the queue we have up right now.
Okay.
Unless people are on this queue to speak to that motion. Councillor Kirby Young, are you on the queue to speak to this motion?
Sure. Thank you.
Well, just one second. No, I don't. The point is I need this. The motion that I need right now is to extend. And so that's what I'm asking if you're on the queue to speak. To the motion to extend past 12 to deal with this. No, you're not. No. Fine. Councillor Hardwick, are you on the floor to speak to the extension past 12 so we can deal with this motion?
No.
All right. Councillor, there's nobody on the floor, so I'm going to call yay and nay on this. So this is a motion to extend to resume hearing from speakers on this motion, members' motion at 2:30. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay.
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 I'm going to have to go to a recorded vote, Madam Clerk, on this. Okay, Councillor Swanson's Weeb, Dominato, Kirby Young, you have not voted yet.
Assist in favor, please. It's Councillor Kirby Young.
Okay. Sorry, there we go. I've got your queue. So that's the motion to extend. We've got the motion to extend to finish this. Thank you very much. It had to be a majority. So now we are dealing. That's just the motion to extend so we can hear this motion, which is by Councillor Swanson. So back to thank you, Council. So the motion on the floor now is to hear speakers on the REIT motion after the meeting reconvenes at 2:30. It is up on our public screen. And Councillor Hardwick, are you on the floor to speak to on the list to speak to that? Go ahead.
Yes, I have a point of information to the clerk, I imagine, and that is, does this mean that list would be limited to people that were on the list to speak to this, or would it be open to more speakers than are on the list that we had not heard from?
Yes, to you, Madam Clerk.
Yes. So this motion would allow those who have registered to speak after 2:30, but no further registrations.
Thank you. That
Councillor
answers my question.
Great. Councillor Bly?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to express my frustration with this last 9 minutes, and that I bite my tongue, but we try and work more efficiently as a council. The chair of the meeting has closed the speakers list. The clerks have done everything they can to get in touch with everybody that has registered to speak. We have had 3 or 4 speakers speak already to this item, so the natural flow is we would continue to hear from speakers and they would continue to sign up. And then, with all due respect, the chair dictating what the motion should say, and while Councillor Swanson is typing and the timer hasn't started for Councillor Swanson in her 5 minutes, I just feel like we are not following good process here. And if we did this to every single person's motion, we would we would get less done than we already do. So I'm happy to hear from speakers, but I think it's more important that the chair chairs the meeting and empowers council to operate in the most efficient way. And my vote will reflect that.
Thanks, Councillor Bly. Councillor Genova.
I did not put myself on the queue.
Okay, Councillor Wiebe.
Yeah, I'm not very comfortable with the process that this has happened. No matter what we vote here, we will be listening to speakers at 2:30 because this part of the meeting is done. But I do think that there was better processes to make this move forward, and I think we need to look at our efficiency. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for speakers to this motion by Councillor Swanson to continue to hear speakers after the meeting reconvenes at 2:30. And Madam Clerk, if you could bring us to a vote on that.
Have a vote assist in opposition, please. Councillor Kirby Young.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you could do it, I can't seem to hold the in opposition, so if you could record that vote. Okay. So that motion fails with Councillor Genova, Hardwick, Wiebe, Dominato, Bly, and Kirby Young in opposition. So we have now dealt with that motion, and the speakers list will remain closed, and we will return. Council, we have a lunch break followed by an in-camera meeting from 2 to 3:30. So we will return at 3:30. Madam Clerk, can you just verify that it is 3:30, not 4 o'clock, that we are returning at?
It is the clerk here, Chair Carr. It's actually 2:30 that we'll be returning.
Sorry, 2:30. 1 to 2:30, right. Lunch
Correct.
break goes from 12 to 1. So 2:30 we are reconvening, and we will deal with debate and decision on this motion and then proceed with the rest of the agenda. Good. Have a good lunch, everyone.